So, Richard, why does the IMF believe that transparency and accuracy in financial reporting is important for the public sector?
I think what we've learned about transparency, and in particular in the wake of the crisis, is that the quality, the frequency and the comprehensiveness of fiscal information that comes into ministries of finance makes a big difference to the actual quality of fiscal outcomes that countries manage to achieve. And one of the things which we did in our recent paper was look at those countries which are more transparent, that produce more information on a more frequent basis, and that provides more detail about the state of the public finances. How do they do in terms of their performance, in terms of deficits and in terms of debts? And what it shows is that in the run-up to the crisis, those countries which were more transparent, went into the crisis with lower deficits and lower levels of debt, and were better able to cope with the pressures put on them during the crisis. And what it also showed is that when the crisis hit, investors in government bonds, gave governments that were more transparent the benefit of the doubt when it came time to purchase their debts than those countries that were less transparent. So it makes a big difference both in either avoiding or being prepared for big shocks when they hit the public finances, and it also helps you to maintain market credibility once a crisis hits.
How important a role do you think that standards have to play in improving transparency and the quality of financial reporting?
I think they play a big they play a big role, and they can make a big difference in the sense that a lot of what you want countries to be able to do to manage this kind of a balance sheet crisis is just adopt international accounting standards which tell you to produce a full balance sheet, to put your financial assets together, also put your fixed assets on there, so that you can understand the overall net worth of government. What you've seen also in the wake of the crisis is a lot of governments trying to realise value from their assets, and not just the financial ones, but there have been big privatisation programs initiated in the wake of the crisis as a way of trying to generate some resources for the government to reduce its liabilities. Standards tell you to maintain balance sheets with all those assets and liabilities on them, but unfortunately too few governments had that information going into the crisis, and so they've lost kind of crucial time in the last few years gathering that information, when if they'd had it at the start they could have launched straight into the privatisation programs they needed to initiate to realise some value and reduce their liabilities and reduce their leverage.
With that in mind, how significant a role could something like European public sector accounting standards have, and what other are there any other initiatives that you see at the moment with a global perspective that show that things are moving in the right direction?
I think it can make a huge difference, and I think in particular what you see in Europe is when Europe commits to doing something, it happens. And you saw that on the statistical side with ISA 95, that once there was a commitment to adopt these things as statistical standards, the coverage of statistics improved, the quality of statistics improved. Obviously, not every country is perfect, but I think Europe does everything you can expect a regional organisation to do to improve statistical reporting. And certainly when we ourselves look back at developments in fiscal transparency over the last decade, one of the biggest improvements you've seen has been in Europe. And that's down to the work that Eurostat and the Commission have done to improve the coverage and quality of fiscal statistics. So I think it's very promising that the same organisations and the same groups of people are now looking into accounting standards and the quality of accounting information as a way of kind of further improving the comprehensiveness and quality of the data that countries collect and report at the European level. I think there are also moves afoot kind of elsewhere in the world to help improve the alignment and consistency of standards, which I think is also a very important development, so that the standards that you use for statistics and the standards you use for accounting and the standards that you use for budgeting speak to each other, and you can get a clear line of sight from the budget through to the statistics, through to the accounts, because that's how you ensure accountability in public finance. You can see what the government said it was going to do, you can see what the government's doing, and you can see what the government did last year, and you can compare those on a one-for-one basis. So that kind of work to align standards, I think, is important.
That's great. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.